The early morning fog rolled across the waters of the Maine coastline as Tom Miller prepared his diving gear on the deck of his small research boat. At 32 years old, he had spent more time underwater than many fish, or at least that's what his fellow marine biologists often joked. The soft orange glow of the rising sun painted the fog in warm colors, promising good visibility for his morning dive. Another day, another set of samples, Tom muttered to himself as he checked his oxygen tanks. He had been studying the local marine ecosystem for the past 5 years, focusing on how climate change affected the deep water creatures in this part of the Atlantic. His small research vessel, though not fancy, had everything he needed: good sonar equipment, sample containers, and most importantly, reliable diving gear. The water temperature reading showed 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. Cold, but nothing his wetsuit couldn't handle. Tom went through his pre-dive checklist one final time, a habit that had saved his life more than once. Air tanks. Full. Backup regulator. Working. Emergency beacon. Charged. Diving computer. Calibrated. As he slipped into the water, the familiar embrace of the ocean welcomed him. The visibility was better than expected, reaching about 40 feet in the early morning light. Tom began his descent, following his usual route down to his research depth of 120 feet. The deeper he went, the darker and cooler the water became, but his powerful diving lights cut through the gloom. Something was different today. At around 100 feet, he noticed an unusual pattern of lights in the water. At first, he thought it might be bioluminescent jellyfish, not uncommon in these waters. But these lights were moving differently, almost purposefully. They pulsed with a blue-green glow that seemed too regular to be natural. What the hell? He thought, adjusting his diving light to get a better look. The pattern was coming from somewhere deeper, past his planned diving depth. Every scientific instinct told him to stick to his planned route. Going deeper meant less bottom time and greater risks. But something about those lights tugged at his curiosity. Tom checked his diving computer and oxygen levels. He had enough air for a slight detour, as long as he was careful. Slowly, he descended toward the mysterious lights, making sure to stay within safe limits. At 150 feet, the water pressure squeezed his wetsuit tighter against his skin, and the darkness pressed in from all sides. The lights grew stronger, and now he could make out movement. Something large was thrashing in the water, creating swirls of bioluminescence around it. As he got closer, his heart nearly stopped. There, trapped in what looked like a mess of old fishing nets and cables, was a humanoid figure. But this was no human diver. Even in the dim light, he could see that the figure's skin had a slight bluish tint, and what looked like delicate patterns of light pulsed beneath its surface. The being was clearly female in form, but with features that marked her as something definitely not from Earth. Most striking were the gill-like structures along her neck, which seemed to be struggling to process the water. Tom's training kicked in. Whatever she was clearly in trouble. The nets had wrapped around her legs and torso, and her movements were growing weaker by the second. He could see panic in her large, almond-shaped eyes as they met his. Years of diving experience had taught Tom that panic was the ocean's deadliest weapon. It could kill you faster than any shark or lack of oxygen. Now, faced with something that would rewrite everything he knew about life in the universe, Tom did what came naturally to him. He pushed aside his shock and focused on the rescue. He unclipped the diving knife from his belt and began moving closer to the trapped figure, his mind racing with equal parts adrenaline and disbelief. Whatever happened next would change everything. But right now, someone needed his help. That was all that mattered. Tom's diving knife glinted in the beam of his flashlight as he approached the trapped alien. The fishing nets had created a deadly web around her, and with each struggle, they only wrapped tighter. He could see her movements becoming slower, more desperate. Whatever helped her breathe underwater wasn't working properly. He held up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace, trying to show her the knife while also making it clear he wasn't a threat. The alien's eyes, larger than human ones, and with a subtle glow of their own, locked onto his. After a moment, she stopped struggling, though whether from trust or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. Moving carefully, Tom began cutting through the nearest section of netting. Up close, he could see that what he'd thought were just fishing nets also included strange metallic cables, perhaps from whatever craft or equipment she'd been using. The alien's skin glowed with patterns that shifted from blue to purple, and he noticed that the glow was getting dimmer. A stream of bubbles burst from her gill structures, and Tom realized she was in worse trouble than he'd thought. The gills seemed clogged with small pieces of plastic and seaweed that had gotten tangled in the netting. No wonder she couldn't breathe properly. Time was running out. Tom worked faster, his knife slicing through rope and wire. His diving training had taught him to stay calm in emergencies, but his heart was racing. One wrong move with the knife could hurt her, but too slow and she might not make it. The alien reached out and touched his arm, her webbed fingers gentle despite her panic. She pointed upward, then at her throat. The message was clear. She needed air, and soon. Tom made a quick decision. He gestured to his spare regulator, the backup breathing device all divers carried. The alien's eyes widened with understanding. As soon as he cut enough netting away from her face, he offered her the regulator. She hesitated for just a second before accepting it. Tom watched anxiously as she put it in her mouth. To his relief, she seemed to know how to use it, taking slow, steady breaths of the pressurized air. Her color immediately began to improve, the patterns under her skin glowing brighter. With her breathing stabilized, Tom returned to cutting her free. The work was tricky. Some of the cables seemed to be made of materials he'd never seen before, and they resisted his knife. But piece by piece, the alien's body came free of the entanglement. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, he cut through the last cable wrapped around her legs. The alien moved cautiously at first, testing her freedom. Then she smiled around the regulator, and her whole body lit up with patterns of bright, swirling colors. Tom checked his diving computer. They had enough air to make it to the surface, but they needed to start ascending soon. He gestured upward, making the standard diving signal for going up. The alien nodded, clearly familiar with diving protocols. They began their ascent together, careful to move slowly to avoid decompression sickness. Tom kept a close eye on both their air supplies and the alien's condition. She swam with natural grace despite her recent ordeal, her movements smooth and efficient in the water. As they rose through the darker waters toward the light above, Tom's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? How could she end up trapped in Earth's oceans? But those questions could wait. Right now, he focused on getting them both safely to the surface. At their first decompression stop, the alien touched his shoulder again. When he turned to look at her, she made a gesture he didn't recognize, pressing her webbed hands together and bowing slightly. Even without understanding the specific meaning, Tom could tell it was a gesture of thanks. He smiled and nodded, then checked his diving computer for their next stop depth. Whatever happened next would be incredible, but first they had to finish this rescue. As they hung suspended in the blue water, sharing air and waiting for the time to pass, Tom realized that his ordinary research dive had just become the most extraordinary moment in human history. The morning sun had burned away most of the fog by the time Tom and the alien broke the surface. His small research boat bobbed gently on the waves about 30 feet away. Tom kept one arm supportively around the alien's shoulder as they treaded water, unsure if she needed the help. She seemed steady enough but didn't pull away from his support. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, not really expecting her to understand. To his complete surprise, she reached up to her neck and touched what he had thought was just another glowing pattern. A small device lit up under her fingers. "Yes, I am well now, thanks to you," she replied in clear English, though her voice had a musical quality to it that made it sound like she was almost singing the words. My name is Blue. That is the closest translation your language has for it. Tom nearly forgot to keep swimming. You can speak English, he managed to say, starting to paddle them both toward his boat. This is a translation device, Blue explained, touching the glowing patch again. We have studied Earth's languages for many years, though I wasn't supposed to need it today. She looked embarrassed, her skin patterns shifting to a deeper purple. They reached the boat, and Tom helped Blue climb aboard first. In the full sunlight, he could see her clearly for the first time. She looked almost human, but her skin had a pale blue tint and was covered in subtle, shifting patterns of light. Her hair was a deeper blue, and what he had thought were strands of seaweed turned out to be natural extensions that moved like thin tentacles. She wore what looked like a skin-tight diving suit made of material he'd never seen before. I'm Tom Miller, he said, pulling himself up onto the boat. I'm a marine biologist. I study ocean life. He started removing his diving gear, watching as Blue did the same with practiced ease. Are you? Not from Earth. Blue smiled, showing teeth that were slightly sharper than human ones. No, I'm from a planet you don't have a name for yet. My people are called the Mary. We're an aquatic species, though we can breathe air too. Our gills just need to stay moist. She touched the gill-like structures on her neck, which now looked less swollen than they had underwater. What happened down there? Tom asked, reaching for a bottle of fresh water from his supplies and offering it to her. She accepted it gratefully. I was stupid and careless, Blue admitted after taking a drink. I'm a junior scientist, studying Earth's deep ocean ecosystems. We have research stations in several Earth oceans. I was supposed to stay in our protected research zones, but I saw something interesting and went too far. Her skin patterns flickered with what Tom was starting to recognize as embarrassment. Your ship got tangled in the fishing nets. Not exactly. Blue's expression grew serious. My personal transport pod malfunctioned. The nets caught me when I tried to swim back to our research station. If you hadn't found me. She shivered despite the warm morning sun. Tom processed this information slowly. So there are more of your people down there, studying Earth. Blue nodded. We've been here for centuries, watching your civilization develop. We're part of a larger group. You might call it a coalition of species. Earth is of great interest to many of them. And no one was supposed to know you were here, Tom guessed. No, Blue agreed. First contact wasn't supposed to happen like this. But now, she looked at him thoughtfully, her skin patterns shifting to a bright, clear blue. Now things will have to change. My people will need to make contact with yours soon. I need to report what happened. Will you be in trouble? Tom asked, concerned. Blue's laugh sounded like tiny bells ringing. For getting caught? Yes, but for being rescued by you. Her pattern swirled with bright colors. I think this might turn out to be a very good thing for both our peoples. Tom's research facility sat on a quiet stretch of coastline, far from the tourist areas and fishing boats. As he pulled his boat into the private dock, he was grateful for the isolation. The morning sun now high in the sky, he helped Blue out of the boat and led her toward the small building he used as both laboratory and living space. It's not much, Tom said, opening the door, but it's private. You'll be safe here until you can contact your people. The main room was filled with research equipment, computer screens, and tanks of various sizes containing local marine life samples. Blue's eyes lit up at the sight of his equipment, her skin patterns shifting to an excited yellow. You study ocean acidification effects on local species, she asked, pointing to one of his ongoing experiments. You can tell that just by looking. Tom was impressed. He'd assumed he'd be the one explaining things to her, not the other way around. Oh yes, though. She touched one of his instruments gently. Your equipment is very basic compared to ours. No offense meant, she added quickly. Tom laughed. None taken. I'd love to hear about your research methods. He pulled up 2 chairs, then went to get them both some water. When he returned, Blue was studying his wall of research photos with intense interest. You know, she said, accepting the water, we've been watching humanity for a very long time, especially your interactions with the oceans. Her expression grew serious. That's part of why we've stayed hidden. Tom sat down across from her, because we haven't been very good caretakers of the oceans. Blue's skin patterns rippled with something like sadness. Partly. But it's more complicated than that. Your species is unique. You have such capacity for destruction, yes, but also for incredible kindness and adaptation. She gestured at his research. Look at your work, trying to understand and protect ocean life, even as others harm it. Over the next few hours, Blue explained more about her civilization. The Mary had evolved on a planet that was mostly ocean, developing technology that worked in harmony with their aquatic environment. They had achieved space travel centuries ago and joined a coalition of advanced species that explored and studied other worlds. Our research stations on Earth are more than just scientific outposts, Blue admitted, her patterns shifting to a deeper, more serious blue. We're part of an assessment team. The coalition has been debating whether Earth is ready for contact. Tom absorbed this information slowly. Ready in what way? Several ways. Technical advancement is one factor, but it's not the most important. Blue stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. We look for signs that a species can handle knowing they're not alone in the universe, that they can be trusted with advanced technology, that they won't react with fear and violence to things they don't understand. Tom thought about this. And what's the verdict so far? Blue turned back to him, her skin pattern showing a mix of colors he hadn't seen before. Mixed. Some think humanity is too volatile, too divided. Others see great potential in your species. She smiled. What you did today, risking your life to save an unknown being. That's the kind of thing the optimists point to. As the afternoon wore on, Blue taught Tom more about her people's technology. She showed him how her translation device worked and explained the basics of their underwater monitoring systems. Tom was amazed to learn that some of the unexplained ocean phenomena he'd studied had actually been caused by Mary research activities. There's so much we could learn from each other, Tom said, looking at his own equipment with new eyes. Yes, Blue agreed, her patterns glowing warmly. But there's something else you should know. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. My rescue signal activated when you freed me. My people are already on their way. Tom felt his heart rate increase. Is that good or bad? Blue's pattern swirled with multiple colors. That depends on what happens next. They'll be here by nightfall. And then, she looked at Tom intently. Then everything changes. The sun was setting over the ocean when Blue suddenly stood up from her chair, her skin patterns flashing with bright pulses of light. They're here, she said, looking out the window at the darkening waters. Tom joined her at the window, but saw nothing unusual at first. Then, about 50 yards offshore, the water began to glow with the same kind of bioluminescence he had seen around Blue earlier. The glow grew stronger and larger, spreading in a perfect circle. We should go to the dock, Blue said, already moving toward the door. Tom followed her, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. They stood at the edge of the dock as the glowing water began to rise. Slowly, a massive shape emerged from beneath the waves. It looked like a giant manta ray made of gleaming metal, with soft lights pulsing along its edges. The vessel was easily the size of a small yacht, but made hardly a sound as it surfaced. That's a Mary research vessel, Blue explained, her patterns glowing in response to the ship's lights. Much bigger than my personal pod. A section of the vessel's smooth surface rippled and opened, revealing an entrance. 3 figures emerged. They looked similar to Blue, but taller and older, their skin patterns more complex and their movements more deliberate. They walked across the water's surface on what seemed to be an invisible bridge, stopping a few feet from the dock. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward. Unlike Blue's youthful appearance, this Mary had deep blue skin with intricate patterns that seemed to hold still rather than swirl. When he spoke, his translation device made his voice sound deep and resonant. "I am lead researcher Deep Current," he said, looking at Tom with intense interest. "Blue has told us what happened. We've reviewed her pod's recordings of the rescue." Tom straightened his back, trying to look professional despite his worn research clothes. "I'm Tom Miller. I hope I didn't cause any diplomatic problems by helping Blue." To his surprise, all three Mary made a gesture similar to the thank you motion Blue had shown him underwater. Their skin patterns synchronized into a beautiful display of flowing colors. "Quite the opposite," said Deep Current. "Your actions today have forced our hand, but in the best possible way." He turned to Blue. "Junior researcher, your carelessness in leaving the safe zone was dangerous. However, it has given us an unexpected opportunity." Blue's patterns showed embarrassment, but also curiosity. "What do you mean, lead researcher?" The second Mary stepped forward. "For 50 years, the Coalition has been deadlocked on the question of Earth. Half believe humans are too dangerous to contact. The other half see humanity's potential." She gestured at Tom. "Today's events will break that deadlock." "I don't understand," Tom said. "All I did was help someone in trouble. Any decent person would have done the same." "That's exactly the point," Deep Current said. "You found an alien creature underwater, completely unknown to you. Instead of running away, capturing her, or calling authorities, you immediately tried to help. You risked your own life without hesitation." The third Mary, who had been quiet until now, added, "And you did this despite knowing nothing about her. Despite your species' tendency to fear the unknown. Despite having no guarantee she wasn't dangerous. The Coalition has been watching humanity's governments, militaries, and large organizations," Deep Current explained. "But perhaps we should have been paying more attention to individuals like you. The capacity for immediate, unquestioning compassion across species boundaries. That's far more valuable than technological advancement." Tom looked at Blue, who was practically glowing with excitement. "What does this mean exactly?" Deep Current's patterns shifted to a formal, ceremonial display. "It means, Tom Miller, that we would like you to be humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Coalition. Your actions prove you have the heart and mind to help bridge our worlds." The sun had fully set now, and the combined glow of four Mary and their vessel lit up the dock like a private light show. As Tom stood there, processing the enormous implications of what he'd just heard, Blue moved to stand beside him. "Still glad you decided to investigate those strange lights underwater?" she asked, her patterns twinkling with amusement. Tom stood on the deck of the Mary vessel, trying to take in everything around him. The inside of the ship looked like something from the most advanced science fiction movies, but somehow more organic. Living lights pulsed along the corridors, and screens made of what seemed like liquid crystal floated in the air. "Please, sit." Deep Current gestured to what looked like a growing crystal formation. To Tom's surprise, it reshaped itself into a comfortable chair as he approached. Blue sat next to him, her patterns showing excitement. "Tom Miller," Deep Current began, "when you rescued Blue, you probably expected nothing in return. This makes what we're about to offer even more appropriate." The lead researcher touched a panel on the wall, and a three-dimensional image appeared in the center of the room. Tom gasped. The image showed Earth, but not like any satellite photo he'd ever seen. Glowing points of light covered the oceans, connected by threads of energy. "What am I looking at?" "Our research network," Blue explained. "Each light is a Mary observation post or research station. We've been studying Earth's oceans for centuries. And now," the female Mary researcher added, "we want to offer you something no human has ever been offered before." She made a gesture, and the image changed to show a vast structure hidden deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. "This is our main Earth facility. We want you to be the first human to visit it." Tom's mouth fell open. "Me? But why?" "Because," Deep Current said, "we need someone who can help introduce our peoples to each other. Someone who has proven they can handle unexpected contact with alien life. someone who acts with compassion first and asks questions later. Blue's patterns swirled with happiness. They want you to be Earth's first ambassador to the coalition, Tom. But I'm just a marine biologist, Tom protested. I don't know anything about diplomacy or international relations. The third Mary researcher spoke up. You know more than you think. Your work shows you understand the delicate balance of ecosystems. You study how different species interact. You look for ways to protect and preserve life. These are exactly the skills an ambassador needs. Deep Current nodded. We don't need another politician. We need someone who understands both the scientific and humanitarian aspects of what's to come. The female researcher touched another panel, and new images appeared. They showed vast underwater cities, ships that could travel through space as easily as water, and technologies Tom couldn't even begin to understand. If you accept, she explained, you'll learn about all of this. You'll help us plan how to introduce these technologies to Earth gradually, in ways that won't disrupt your civilization too severely. You'll be the bridge between our worlds. The coalition has already approved this plan, Deep Current added. They were impressed by the recording of Blue's rescue. They agree that someone capable of such instinctive cross-species compassion is ideal for this role. Tom looked at Blue, who gave him an encouraging smile. What about my research here? That's the best part, Blue said excitedly. You'll have access to all our data about Earth's oceans. Centuries of observations, studies of species you haven't even discovered yet. Think of how much good you could do with that knowledge. And of course, Deep Current added, you'll have time to put your affairs in order and prepare. We understand this is a life-changing decision. Tom stood up and walked to the window-like surface of the vessel. He could see his small research facility on the shore, its lights dim compared to the bioluminescent glow of the Mary ship. This morning, he had been just another marine biologist doing his small part to understand the oceans. Now, he turned back to the group. If you think I can help, if you really believe I'm the right person for this, then yes, I accept. Blue's patterns exploded with joyful colors. The other Mary displayed their own patterns of approval and satisfaction. Deep Current rose and made a formal gesture. Then, Tom Miller, welcome to your new role as humanity's first ambassador to the stars. 2 weeks had passed since Tom's life-changing decision. He stood at the podium in the United Nations General Assembly Hall, looking out at the sea of faces before him. Representatives from every nation on Earth waited anxiously for him to speak. Behind him stood Blue and Deep Current, their presence causing excited whispers throughout the hall. Getting to this moment hadn't been easy. The first few days after his decision had been a whirlwind of activity. The Mary had helped him prepare his presentation to the world's governments, backing up his story with undeniable evidence of their presence on Earth. Their massive vessel now floated openly in New York Harbor, impossible to ignore or deny. Tom took a deep breath and began his speech. 20 years ago, I decided to become a marine biologist because I wanted to understand the oceans. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that the oceans held far more mysteries than I ever imagined. He gestured to his alien companions. As you can see, we are not alone in the universe. More importantly, we are not alone in our own oceans. The room remained silent, hanging on his every word. Tom continued, his voice growing stronger. The Mary have been studying us for centuries. They're part of a larger community of spacefaring species, a coalition that has been watching humanity's development. And now, thanks to a chance encounter and a simple act of helping someone in need, they're ready to welcome us into their community. Blue stepped forward, her skin patterns creating a gentle, calming display. She activated her translation device and addressed the assembly. We chose Tom Miller as humanity's first ambassador because he showed us humanity's best qualities. When he found me trapped underwater, he didn't hesitate to help, even though I was clearly not human. This is the kind of instinct we value in the coalition. Deep Current joined them, his formal patterns drawing gasps of amazement from the crowd. We offer humanity a chance to join us, not as subordinates, but as partners. We have much to teach you, but we also have much to learn from you. Tom pulled up the holographic displays the Mary had provided, showing the assembly images of their underwater cities, their advanced technology, and their environmental preservation methods. "This is just the beginning," he explained. "The Mary will help us clean our oceans, develop sustainable energy sources, and advance our technology in ways that work with nature instead of against it." Questions erupted from the assembly. How long will this take? What are the conditions? Why now? Tom raised his hands for quiet. "This will be a gradual process. We'll start with environmental restoration projects and scientific exchange programs. The coalition believes in responsible development. No technology will be shared until we're ready to use it wisely." Blue touched his shoulder supportively as he continued. "I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I'm a scientist who happened to be in the right place at the right time, doing what any decent person would do. But that's exactly why the Mary chose me, because sometimes the simplest actions have the biggest impact." As the session continued, Tom felt a deep sense of rightness about it all. Looking out at the assembly, he saw fear and uncertainty in some faces, but also hope and excitement in many others. This was just the first step in a journey that would change everything. Later that evening, Tom stood with Blue on the observation deck of the Mary vessel, watching the sunset over Manhattan. The city lights were starting to come on, mirroring the bioluminescent patterns of the ship. "Nervous about what comes next?" Blue asked, her patterns showing friendly concern. Tom smiled. "A little. It's a lot of responsibility. But you know what? This morning I saw a pod of whales swimming near the ship, completely unafraid. If they can adapt to your presence so easily, I think humanity will too." From studying ocean life to helping guide humanity into a galactic community, Blue's patterns twinkled with amusement. Not bad for a regular marine biologist. "Nothing regular about any of this," Tom laughed. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." As night fell over the city, the Mary vessel's lights created beautiful patterns on the water's surface. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new opportunities. But for now, Tom was content knowing that a simple act of kindness had opened the door to humanity's greatest adventure.